Good evening.
Audra, you're muted.
Check, check. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. You good.
Okay, great. All right. So I'll start over. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for IKG's Wisdom Wednesday. I am your host, Sister Ajwa, and we are thankful and excited that you are here this evening for what we are sure will be an enlightening program. Before we begin, I do want to remind you that this is a webinar, so your cameras and audio are automatically muted. We do ask that you engage us via the chat. And at the end, there will be a Q&A session. So if you do have questions for our speaker, please be sure to put your questions in the Q&A box so that we are able to see them and ask them of our speaker. As many of you are doing, you are placing in the chat where you are from so we can shout you out. So I'm going to give folks a little bit more time to do that. So as you're letting us know where you're checking in from, I do want to remind you to check out IKG's culturalresourcecenter.com website, where you will learn more where you can learn more about IKG, including our Wisdom Wednesday series, as well as our Egypt on the Potomac field trip, which is a cultural field trip of Washington, D.C., revealing secrets hidden in plain sight. We have two more field trips of the season left, October and November. Those field trips occur the first Saturday of the month. There is a morning and an afternoon session, so you still have time to check it out. And you can also learn about other programming projects that IKG is hosting. So, as you all are coming in the room, again, we want to say thank you. And we have family checking in, of course, from all over the world. We got Tennessee, we have Las Vegas, Nevada, Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you for joining us. Tampa, Florida, Clearwater. Thank you. We have Akron, Ohio, Clinton, Maryland, Alexandria, of course, Mighty Mighty DC, where we are based. Thank you for joining us. We have Chicago, California. Thank you for joining us. Oregon, New Jersey, Philadelphia. Wonderful. Okay. Dayton, Ohio. Let's see where else we coming from. Virginia, North Carolina, Bowie, Maryland, Texas, Germantown, Brooklyn, New York. All right, keep them coming in. So, tonight's program, we are so pleased and honored to have Robin Walker, who will be speaking on unlocking powerful Black history from ancient African art in London museums. He writes, many years ago, historians discovered that African civilization history could be written using African art. Some of the art pieces were of technological value that used advanced metallurgical or mathematical techniques in their composition. Others stored great economic value as wealth preserving assets. Others were simply works of inspirational beauty and refinement. However, much of this art is in London institutions. How did these art pieces end up in London? How much wealth is Africa missing by these pieces being in London and not in Africa? Robin Walker, the Black History Man, will introduce you to stunning ancient African heritage from Congo, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Sudan, and other countries. From this seminar tonight, you will be able to enjoy the amazing beauty of African art and craft, be informed on the status of these pieces and a discussion on reparations, learn how the technological construction of these pieces destroy notions of a backward and primitive Africa. Dip your toe into the complex history of the African kingdoms and reinforce pride in our collective heritage. Robin Walker, the Black History Man, was born in London but has also lived in Jamaica. He is an entrepreneur, publisher, educator, and author. From 1987 to 1990, he led economics at the London School of Economics. In 91 and 92, he studied African World Studies with the brilliant Dr. Femi Biko and later with Mr. Kenny Baikie. Between 1993 and 1994, he trained as a secondary school teacher at Edge Hill College. In 2006, Walker wrote the seminal When We Ruled. It is the most advanced synthesis on ancient and medieval African history ever written by a single author. In 2011, Black Classic Press of Baltimore published a U.S. version of this book. Between 2013 and 2024, Walker followed this with several publications, including When We Ruled, Second Edition, When We Ruled, the Study Guide, Blacks in Science, Blacks in Religion, The Rise and Fall of Black Wall Street, and the Seven Key Empowerment Lessons, The Black Musical Tradition in Early Black Literature, 19 Lessons in Black History, A History of Africa, and the ALCS award-winning Black History Matters. He also wrote 4 books in collaboration with others, including Everyday Life in an Early West African Empire, African Mathematics, History, Study Guide, and Classroom Lessons, Black British History, Black Influences on British Culture from 1948 to 2016, and 30 Black History Icons. In 2022, he co-founded the online adult education business, The Black Secret, which teaches Black history and African heritage to adults. He has delivered classes and lectures for the Department for Education, Department for Transport, National Audit Office, Meta, Evercore, Victoria and Albert Museum, the Petrie Museum of Egyptian Archaeology, Unison, Jaguar Land Rover, Sky UK, and Schroders, among many others. So again, we are pleased and happy and excited to bring to you this evening Brother Robin Walker. And you are on.
Greetings, greetings, greetings. Can I be heard?
Yes, we
me?
can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, let me move this out of the way. Hide floating meeting controls and from the beginning. All right, can that be seen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. All right, greetings, everybody. The presentation is called Unlocking Powerful Black History from Ancient African Art in London Museums. So why are we here? I want to give you a history lesson, but I also want to introduce my business so you find out who we are and what we do. So there's 2 real ambitions in today's session. Now, in delivering the content, I hope to make sure that you get value. I don't want to waste anyone's time. I want you to feel that you came away with useful content. So I'm going to get straight into it. I represent an adult education online Black History and African Heritage company, and our company is called The Black Secret. we have the education project, we have the business project. And the point here is to popularize Black history by talking about Africa's great civilizations and linking that history to Black people in the diaspora and bringing the story up to date, including things like African American civil rights and Black Wall Street. The Black Secret is a fundamental empowerment concept where we are quietly empowering the people. Now, one of the things that I'd like to do is to give away a free book that we have. So if you check us out at https://www.theblacksecret.co.uk, we are giving away a free ebook called 100 Black History Facts. So make sure that you go on our site and download the free 100 Black History Facts, and that will show the concept of Black history that we do at the Black Secret Education Project. All right, so let me get into today's session. Our story begins with a German scholar. This German, doesn't he look a little bit like Hitler? This German was called Leo Frobenius, and despite the appearance, he has a lot of use to say about early Africa and its history and heritage. He wrote a book published in France. This one was published in France, and the English title would be History of African Civilization. And he addresses what Europeans found in Africa 500 years ago. And this is what he says. When they, the Europeans, arrived in the Gulf of Guinea and landed at Ouida in West Africa, the captains were astonished to find streets well laid out, bordered on either side for several leagues by 2 rows of trees. For days they traveled through a country of magnificent fields, inhabited by men clad in richly colored garments of their own weaving. Further south, in the kingdom of the Congo, a swarming crowd dressed in silk and velvet, great states well ordered, and down to the most minute details, powerful rulers, flourishing industries, civilized to the marrow of their bones. And the condition of the countries on the eastern coast, Mozambique, for example, was quite the same. And that's what Professor Frobenius wrote in his French language book, Histoire de la Civilisation Africaine. Now, when I read that, first of all, I needed to find out where on earth is Congo, and how did Professor Frobenius know any of this? All right, so where was Congo? On a modern map, some of that would be modern Angola. Some of it would be a part of Western Congo. And essentially, Europeans are starting off in places like Portugal, sailing their way around West Africa, going to Southwest Africa, passing places like Congo, landing at the southern tip of Africa, and then traveling their way up the east coast and finding magnificence, says Professor Frobenius. So how did Frobenius know any of this? What was his evidence? What was his proof? He says, and what they told those old captains, those chiefs of expeditions, the Delbey, the Demarche, the Pigafettas, and all the others, what they told is true. It can be verified. In the old Royal Kunstkammer of Dresden, in the Vedermann collection of Ulm, in many another European curiosity cabinets, one still finds collections of objects from West Africa dating from that epoch. Wonderful plush velvets of an extreme softness, made from the tenderest leaves of a certain banana tree, stuffs, soft and pliant, brilliant and delicate as silks, woven with well-prepared raffia fiber. Ceremonial javelins, their blades to the very point, inlaid with the finest copper. Bows so graceful and ornamented so beautifully that they would do honor to any museum of arms whatsoever. Calabashes decorated with the most perfect taste. Sculpture in ivory and wood, the workmanship of which reveals skill and style. So what's Frobenius's evidence? We should go check out the European curiosity cabinets. And one of the places he said we should check out is the old Royal Kunstkammer of Dresden in Germany. So I did some sniffing around and I found a Congolese artifact in the Royal Kunstkammer of Dresden, and it was checked in before the year 1533. And this is an ivory trumpet. And if you look at the body of the trumpet, you will see that there are a whole series of repeated patterns. And those patterns are a branch of mathematics called symmetry. You did this in school. How you cover a space using reflection, rotation, rotating the same thing by 60 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, all that kind of stuff. You can see that those patterns are following the same things are involved in the study of symmetry. And if you look towards the mouth of the trumpet, the bell area, you can see that there's a network pattern carved into it. Very, very impressive, coming from Congo. And is that how the Congolese were going on before 1533? Interesting. This is also from the Royal Kunstkammer of Dresden, also from Congo. And you can see it's a knife case, it's a long knife, and it's a case made of ivory. And again, you can see the repeated patterns carved into it. You can see the four figures like this. You can see Wakanda forever kind of pose, ancient Egyptian kind of pose, four figures. And then it's held up by four caryatids holding the whole structure up. Is that not exquisite? Did we know that that is how the people of Congo were going on in medieval times? And this is the work that was collected and ended up in European royal collections. Now, this is from Sapi. Sapi is where Sierra Leone is today, West Africa. And this was made between 1490 and 1520 AD. And let's look at it from another angle. What is it? It's a salt cellar. The posh word that they use in the artistic catalogs, they call it a condiment bowl, posh way of saying salt cellar. So did we know that exquisite salt cellars made of ivory, carved with all these intricate details, were made between 1490 and 1520 in Sierra Leone, West Africa? And what happened was these pieces developed a reputation. And so in Europe, you had people buying their bowls and dishes from China, which is why bowls and dishes are called China. And then they would buy their condiments from West Africa. And these are the kinds of exquisite pieces that would find their way into the collections, the royal collections in Europe. Even people like Henry VIII had collections of these sorts of pieces. So how did it end up in the British Museum? It's quite possible that it would have been through trade and trading networks. In other words, nothing sinister. We'll deal with the sinister stuff later on. And there's more. This is also from Sierra Leone, and it's also an ivory trumpet. So what have we learned? It's not just Congo that was producing these exquisite ivory trumpets. Sierra Leone in West Africa was also producing these exquisite trumpets at the same time. Now, this particular piece originated in Nupe. Nupe is where Nigeria is today. But how it ended up in Europe is it wasn't bought from Nupe. It was actually from Dahomey, the same civilization that the film The Woman King was dealing with. That same civilization is where this was acquired. This is what the British Museum website says. The acquisition register records that these were the robe and cap of the King of Dahomey, given to Vice Admiral Eardley Wilmot by the King of Dahomey between 1863 and 1866. The cloth is likely to be Nupe, Nigeria, and the embroidery Hausa, also Nigeria. Now, these are the exquisite textiles that you see the Nigerian politicians wearing, the Nigerians elite wearing. And these textiles are extremely grand, made of cotton, made of silk. Did we know that African elites wore silk? Did we know that African textiles that were very common across West Africa had silk yarns? You see, a lot of people talk about silk and the Silk Road, and they don't mention Africa. They don't mention us. They don't mention that this is what our textiles looked like. Now, there were also pieces from Yoruba land, which is a different part of Nigeria. And these were also probably traded. How they ended up in Britain wasn't because of sinister reasons, but it was because of trade. And this is a ewer. A ewer is a water jug, and they're not sure when it was made. It could have been 16th century, which is 1500s. It could have been 19th century, which is 1800s. And at some point over that 300 or 400 year period is when it was made. And it ended up, probably through trade networks, it ended up in London and it ended up in the British Museum. Did we know that Yoruba water jugs look like this? And you can see the different patterns, and the patterns very often have religious significance. People that are Yorubas are pointed out, oh, well, that represents this particular deity or whatever. And it's made of ivory, and then the stand and so on is made of iron. And this is an armlet, also from Yoruba land. This would be something that you'd wear almost like a bangle. And this was made between the 17th, which is the 1600s, to the 19th century, the 1800s. Now, the Empire of Benin, there were pieces that were acquired, again, by trade between 1525 and 1600. This is a salt cellar. So here we're seeing somewhere else in West Africa making salt cellars. And this is another salt cellar. Now, if you look carefully, the people depicted on these salt cellars are actually Europeans. They're actually Portuguese. Because once West Africans realized that European elites were buying these pieces, they would then, okay, let's put some European faces on them as well. So you'll notice that some of these people have got Christian crosses around their necks. They are in Portuguese dress and so on. But these pieces were made in Benin. Benin is another part of what would today be Nigeria. And a scholar from West Africa, Dr. R.E.G. Armatoe, thought that these pieces could be used to prove the golden age of West African civilization. So what did Dr. Armatoe say? He said, these art treasures, which formed the delight and wonder of aesthetes for 500 years, are still to be seen in the National Museum at Copenhagen. Duke Ferdinand Albert I of Brunswick-Lüneburg obtained numerous treasures from West Africa, and his collections may be studied. Before the collections of the Dauphin of France and of the princes of Europe, whether they be calabashes, garments, gold and silver, of copper or bronze, bejeweled bows and arrows, treasure boxes or wigs, of carved wooden figures, terracotta or bronze heads, or of reliefs from mural decorations of African homes, the modern scholar stands in outraged awe. In other words, no matter what artifacts you're looking at, there are so many examples from African civilizations that upset the idea of primitive, backward Africa. I mean, just look at that spoon on the left-hand side, made of ivory. Does your spoon at home, is it made of ivory? Does it look like that? What about this one? Is that not exquisite? Is that not amongst the finest that the human mind and the human hand has ever created? However, most art from Benin entered Europe in other ways. And these other ways is where we're into the realm of art theft, plunder, conquering countries and stealing what they had. And that's what's happened right here. You can see the pieces on the floor. The British conquered Benin in 1897. The picture says Lieutenant Robertson defending the rear guard in the final advance on Benin City. And this took place 1897. Britain conquered the medieval civilization of Great Benin and ended up stealing thousands and thousands of pieces of fine art and craft. And they ended up in London museums, they ended up in Parisian museums, they ended up in German museums, they ended up in private collections. And these pieces, they're not wooden, they are made of metal, they are made of bronze. And these pieces were made in the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries. So you're looking at pieces that were made between the year 1400 and something and 1700 and something. Absolutely wonderful pieces of work. I'm going to show you the close-up of one of them, and you can see the soldiers with their shields, and you can see the young boys with them. Is that not a powerful work of metal art? Now, to make these metal pieces, there's a production process called the 6-stage lost wax technique. And that would involve making a clay mold of this, and then you would then use beeswax to then put in all the details. You would put the mold into a kiln and fire it, and then the beeswax runs out because the melting point of beeswax is lower than the melting point of clay, leaving a gap. And into that gap, you will pour your molten metals, and they will then take on that particular shape and wait for everything to cool and harden, and then remove the outer clay and the inner clay. And essentially, you will then get these shapes being made out of these molds. And this is the kinds of technology that West Africa was dealing with during this time period. Let me show you some other Benin masterpieces. There's Benin on the map, the southern part of modern Nigeria. And is that not exquisite? It's a leopard. It's actually a water container made to look like a leopard, again made of bronze. And this is a cockerel. made of bronze. And there's more. Here you can see a trader on horseback, and there he is from a different angle. Here you can see a musician. This is a flautist, someone playing the flute, and again from a different angle. The most famous image are the ones from the 16th century of the Queen Mother Idia and early 16th century. So these were made somewhere around 1505 onwards. And if you look at the details of the nose and the mouth, you can see that the nose and the mouth are almost geometric in the way they've been rendered. And when you take non-geometric shapes and render them as geometric shapes, this is called cubism. And this was invented allegedly by Pablo Picasso in the 20th century. But these works are 16th century. So the whole cubist aesthetic, Africans were on that hundreds of years before Pablo Picasso. Here's another of the Queen Mother Idia busts. And if you look at the base, you can see a network pattern. Again, those of you that have done mathematics, you will know what networks are. You can see the network pattern on the base. Now, let me explain why Nigeria is not going to get these pieces back. You see, this is another of the Queen Mother Idia images. This is in ivory now. And here's another one. And it's in a London newspaper called the Metro. And this London newspaper, this particular one is December 22nd, 2010. And let's look at the caption. Out of Africa, a 16th century ivory mask looted by the British during an invasion of Benin in West Africa in 1897 is set to go for £5 million at auction at Sotheby's in London. £5 million for one piece, and this was 2010. It's not 2010 anymore. That was 15 years ago. 2025, that 5 million would have gone up to a much bigger figure. And so you can imagine what that figure would be in American dollars. That would be a lot of money, and that's just one piece. And then if you multiply that by the thousands of pieces that were looted in 1897, you can now see why Nigeria is unlikely to get this material back. And so when we're talking about reparations, these are the kinds of figures that need to be a part of the discussion. So let me set you a task. Discuss the following questions. Why are these pieces worth so much? Remember, the £5 million figure was 2010. I wouldn't be surprised if that figure is 15 million right now, and that's just one piece. How did their value become so high? What I'd like you to do is to type what you think into the chat, and perhaps Atlantis could read it to me, what people are saying in the chat. I'm going to give you 1 minute. Off you go. Type what you think, and perhaps Atlantis could read it to me. Is there anything coming through?
Yes, there are some coming through. So we have 10 million. Michael says 10 million. Robert says 100 million. Shanice says material design and social value. Heather says value Europeans set the price. Is the value the Europeans set the price as. Queen Mother Miata worked a lot to keep the knowledge and maintain the noble lie. Coach
Mhm.
C, let's see, there's a lot coming in. The art world has set these prices. Ajay, the work because the craftspeople are no longer able to produce work like this today. Tim, it is from the hands of the living gods. There's some more coming in. Thurl, because they are works of art that can't be duplicated. Wendy, there was nothing of the kind in Europe. Let's see. Cordell, rarity alone with knowingly racist inflation are the factors. Najuma, over time, history of this art increased. Let me scroll down 1 second. Marcus, because there is no other artwork such as these throughout the world. Let's see. There's some more. Ajay, again, the ivory is not available today to make items like this again. Tendai, these are considered investments. They have dollar value, they are assets. Jason says, 1 second. Europeans try to outprice Africans and African nations. Robert, law of supply and demand. Kamal thinks they're worth 2 trillion. There's some more. 1 second. It's like when I go down, it scrolls past quite a few. Dominique, because Europeans are acquisitive and thieves at the core. Jonathan, worship. Rebecca, scientific research. Frank, art pieces in general have been appreciating at higher rates than other types of investments. Very limited supply and high demand by wealthy investors. Let's see. Europeans have a monopoly from Robert. Najima, they know the power of the mask and other artifacts, priceless. And finally, again, AJ, because the European oligarchs enjoy feeling they have trophies from the colonial era that no one else has. Eric, when they assign a value to something, they will compete for its purchase. And finally, Tendai, assets are like gold. Paper money is worthless.
Some powerful, 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 powerful responses. Let me thank everyone for contributing. Powerful. There's a scholar called George Sabira, and he wrote a classic book in 1980 called Black Folks' Guide to Making Big Money in America. And there is the legendary George Sabira. He says, in your struggle out of poverty and powerlessness, never forget the golden rule. He who has the gold rules. So how much are you worth? Sabira explains that there's a measure of how much an individual is worth called equity. The other name for that measure is net worth. And equity or net worth is how much do you own minus how much do you owe. So what assets do the rich own? The rich own art, property, stocks, coins, stamps, furniture, etc., etc., but not calculated at the price that they were bought at, but calculated at the price that they can be resold at, resale value. And that value has a tendency to go up and up and up each year. Now, where does this extra come from? This is what an asset is all about. Value that goes up and up. And once your value goes up, the amount that it goes up by tends to jump year on year on year. And these jumps is called compounding. Compounding increases in value. So some people call compounding the eighth wonder of the world. Supposing asset values rise at the rate of 10% per year, how would this affect a person with £100,000 worth of assets or £200,000 worth of assets? At the end of the second year, our first person's assets are worth 110,000. Our second person's assets are worth 220,000. That's a 10% increase. At the end of year 3, the 10% increase becomes 121,000 for our first individual and 242,000 for our second individual. A 10% increase on that, a compound increase. By year 4, our first person's assets might be worth 133,100. Our second person's increase in value is 266,200. At the end of year 5, our first person's assets could be worth 146,410. Our second person's assets could be worth 292,820. Now, can you see that no work has pushed those asset values up? It's just holding on to the asset and it being worth more, so that if you were to sell those assets at the end of year 5, you could sell them for nearly 50% more than what they were worth in year 1. And at 10% increase, the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger each year. That's the power of compounding. Now, what work did these asset holders do to increase these values? They didn't do any more work. So equity, how much do you own minus how much do you owe? Where are you at? So why does net worth matter? This is what George Sabira says. As I'm writing this book, gold is going absolutely crazy, berserk. Around Thanksgiving 1979, gold was worth maybe $425 an ounce. And by the week after New Year's, it was about $610 an ounce. Now, let's say I'm wealthy and have a good income, and somebody calls me on November 15th and says, "Hey, Sabira, go buy some gold. It's going to go through the roof in a couple of months." Now, you can't buy gold like you do penny candy. You can't go to a precious metal broker and say, "1 ounce of gold, please." You have to buy a block of gold to make it worth anybody's effort. But first I go to the bank and borrow some money. The banker says, "I see here you make $100,000 per year. Your house is worth $150,000, but you only owe $46,000 on it. How much would you like to borrow?" I say, 80,000. "Fine, Mr. Sabira. I'll draw the papers up this afternoon and you can come in tomorrow to pick up your check." I take the check to the gold dealer and say, "I want 80,000 in gold." "Yes, sir," the dealer says. "Here is your certificate certifying your purchase of 188 ounces of gold." Now, between Thanksgiving and New Year's, I do what everybody else does this time of year. I watch football, drink eggnog, buy holiday presents, and kiss women under the mistletoe. After New Year's Day's over and gone, I look in the paper and see that in those 45 days or so, my 188 ounces of gold is now worth over $114,000. That, my friend, is $34,000 in gross profit in a month and a half time. Now, what work did I do? What money did I spend? Now do you see why the wealthy borrow big sums of money? You have to be worth it to borrow it. You've got to invest it to make more, and it all takes very little energy, either physically or mentally. How much did you make between Thanksgiving and New Year's? And that's the principle. Once you have assets, you can borrow against them. And once our assets are in European museums' collections and private collections, those assets are worth billions to the Europeans, and they can borrow billions against those assets. and they can do exactly what George Sabira has described here. And they can make investments off the borrowing against those assets and make even more money. And then our countries are now poorer than they would have been because those assets are in Europe and not in our countries. Do we understand this? Okay, stretch time. Now, what's stretch time? It means you need to get up, you need to stretch, you need to walk around, you need to recover from being blapped by the information that I'm giving you. And then we will reconvene in 30 seconds. 30 seconds time, we shall reconvene, and then we'll get into part 2. All right, I think that's now 15 seconds time. 15 seconds time, we are going to reconvene. Okay, let's reconvene. Horrible things happened in Makdala, Ethiopia, 1868. Horrible things. You can see large numbers of Africans dead in a military campaign where Britain conquered them and looted. So where is Makdala? This is a map that was drawn by the legendary Professor W.E.B. Du Bois. He calls it Abyssinia. On a modern map, we would call that Ethiopia. And according to Professor Richard Pankhurst, this is what happened. The largest number of Ethiopian manuscripts abroad, over 850, are in the United Kingdom. A little less than half were looted by the Makdala expedition of 1867-1868. So they've made it clear these pieces have been looted. Europeans conquered these places and stole these manuscripts. And you can see where they've ended up. Bodleian Library in Oxford, Cambridge University Library, etc., etc. And it then goes on to say 9 scrolls formerly in the possession of the London Library, all or mainly from Makdala, were sold by Sotheby's in July 1970. Let's look at one of these manuscripts. This manuscript is called the Acts of King Lalibela. And you can see the beautiful Ethiopic script. And that script, by the way, is the parent of the Armenian script of Turkey and the Georgian script of what is in Georgia, which is right next to Russia. Did we know that this African script is the parent of 2 scripts in Europe? Did we know this? Anyhow, you can see King Lalibela, and he's a king from the 12th century in Ethiopia, and he has a pickaxe in his hand, and in that pickaxe, he is chiseling away. And as he's chiseling away, our buildings are appearing. And what this represents is a construction that he ordered, which was the building of the city of Lalibela with its 11 underground churches. And those churches are still there. They're still tourist attractions. I visited them 2 years ago. Very, very impressive. Now, what else? This silver artifact, and this is what the British Museum says, made in Ethiopia, acquired Makdala. Now, can you see they've used the word acquired? Acquired? Don't they mean stolen from Makdala, 1868, made of silver? Did we know that Africans made silver artifacts like this? 18th century, this is 1700s. Other pieces, 19th century, these copper pieces used in church ritual also ended up in European museums collections. These again are in London. What else? This particular piece ended up in the Victoria and Albert Museum, also in central London. And the museum website says this Ethiopian dress belonged to Queen Terenesh or Empress Wube, the second wife of Emperor Tewodros II. The Queen died about a month after the 1868 siege of Magdala, while being escorted by the British Army to her home province. Her possessions were then sent to England to the Secretary of State for India, who gave this garment to the Victoria and Albert Museum in 1869. Items looted during the siege were also given to the museum. So they've made it clear, stolen artifacts. Now let's take a look at the dress. This is in Ethiopia. And if you look at the neck area and the neck decoration, doesn't that look like the kinds of things you'd see in West Africa as well? Showing that these decorated neck areas, this is something that went across Africa. And it's very important that people see African textiles because we've got to beat people up. You know, when there's this idea of African nakedness and backwardness. No, these are the kinds of textiles that our people used to wear. Another piece that was looted is this. This three-tiered crown is believed to be 1740 in origin, ended up being looted at Magdala, and it originally belonged to one of the greatest rulers in Ethiopian history, Empress Mentawab. Now, have we seen this? Has this appeared in any of the African history books? I'm dealing with a learned and hip crowd. Can anyone put in the chat, have you seen this in any of the books you've ever seen before? Can I get a yes or a no? And perhaps Atlantis could read to me the answers.
So I'm getting no's. There's a lot
Now,
of no's coming in.
now, isn't that amazing that something that incredible has not made it into any of the history books? Now, just let that sink in. Other pieces were acquired in other ways. During the colonial period, you get anthropological plunder. And this is where the colonial overlords will just say, I like what you have, I'm taking it. And here's an example. The British Museum website says, 1 and 2 were given by F. O'Donnell Burke and described in the register as a suit of armor obtained in Ningi district, south of Kano, North Nigeria. Notice the word obtained. Obtained, you can work out. You have that, I'm taking it from you. Now, what is this? Chainmail. And chainmail is what knights in their shining armor would wear. Did we know that? In Africa, we had knights, and that's what our knights wore. Did we know this? And if we didn't know this, why isn't this common knowledge? Why isn't this public knowledge? Everyone should know this. And then we've got other examples of archaeological plunder. This is where archaeologists dig something up and then remove it from the country. The Oni portrait head from Ife, Yoruba land, Nigeria. And this particular piece could have been made at any time between the 11th century and the 15th century. And it's one of the great pieces of world art. The modeling, the detail are very, very impressive. Yet that piece is in London. Why is it not in Nigeria? And because it's older than the Benin pieces, if the Benin pieces are worth millions each, these will be worth more because they've had a longer time to compound. But the British Museum did make replicas of other Yoruba pieces in 1947, 1948. So these pieces in London are replicas, and the originals of these pieces are in Nigeria. So let's get it correct. This one is in London, having been plundered by the archaeologists. These replicas are in London, the originals are in Nigeria. Now, what happened was a news organization contacted me to ask my opinion on what should happen to the looted pieces. And then this is what was broadcast over the news.
Well, now, when British forces sacked Benin City back in 1897, they returned to London not just with the revenge they were seeking for a massacre, but a hoard of stolen treasures, well, now spread across Europe and America in private and public collections. The Nigerian government has begun requesting the return of the so-called Benin bronzes. A Cambridge college will become the first British institution to officially repatriate their artefact, a bronze cockerel. And it raises questions for other organisations now in possession of the looted artefacts. Shingi Marurike reports.
A joyful sound to mark a moment in history. After more than a century, this sacred African artefact is returning home. It is one of the Benin bronzes, a collection of sculptures stolen from Nigeria in 1897 by British soldiers before being placed in Cambridge. Now, Jesus College has put pen to paper on a historic agreement, becoming the first place to return one.
I think we've now begun to realise how historic it is. I mean, the outpouring of contacts and just people just saying this is fantastic. Requests to say, look, can you please live stream the ceremony? I hope we do it justice today. It is a very historic day.
Events like today's will pile the pressure on other institutions. The British Museum holds hundreds of items that also come from the Kingdom of Benin, but has not yet committed to returning them. Museums in Europe have already begun deciding how they will face their imperial pasts. This exhibition is the last time these treasures will be displayed in France, while Germany became the first country to agree to hand back their bronzes earlier this year. Some historians are suggesting solutions.
Institutions with the resources, such as the British Museum, should commission replicas of the pieces. They certainly have the skills and they have the wealth to do it. And then keep the replicas here and then return the original pieces to Nigeria.
Today is much more than a ceremony. It's more symbolic, it's more significant, and it's bigger than all of us here. It goes back centuries.
People here have spent years picturing today's milestone. Passionate speeches like this one are a reminder they see this ceremony as part of something bigger. For African countries trying to recover works pillaged by European explorers and colonists, this handover is just the start. Shingi Marike, Sky News.
All right, now let me explain how that happened. The master of the college, Sonita Alain, I think she's from Barbados. She became the head of that college and she was able to make that happen. But that's the only one piece. So big up to Sonita Alain for making that happen. But obviously there are thousands and thousands of pieces that would need to be tracked down and then returned to where they need to be so that that wealth benefits where it needs to benefit. All right, now the final problem is when archaeologists dig up new information but hide it away in European institutions. So many people new to African history question the following. 1, did Africans make use of the wheel? 2, did Africans use textiles? 3, did Africans write? And 4, did Africans have great architecture? Now let me explain why these questions are important. We all heard the news in London that one of the alt-rightist figures in America got shot a few days ago, and that's creating reverberations in the alt-right world. And the alt-right have been teaching for years that you Africans are backward. Why are you backward? You had no wheel, you had no textiles, you had no writing, and you had no architecture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to challenge this with evidence from what is either in London museums or what the people from the London museums know. And I'm going to use the example from the ancient civilization of Kush, and that is in Sudan, and the medieval civilizations in the same place, the medieval civilizations of medieval Nubia, and there's three such civilizations, Nobadia, Makuria, and Alwa. So we're going to look at ancient Sudan, Kush, and medieval Sudan, Nobadia, Makuria, and Alwa. And this is what the British Museum either has or knows about. Now, why are these pieces important? These pieces are not on display. So you may wonder, well, Robin, how do you know about them? I know about them because I know how to search the British Museum's catalogue to find out what they actually have. And this is what they have. This is what they're admitting to having, but these pieces are not on display. Moreover, these pieces have not appeared in any African history book. Cups, 1st century AD. The British Museum website says about these cups, angular wheel-made cup in a typical Meroitic style with flat base, low angular shoulder, and straight walls with direct rim, covered in pale orange slip and decorated with a frieze marked by black lines above and below, filled with large crescents topped with degraded Ankh signs. All right, so you'll read that and someone write in the chat, how were these cups made? Someone put that in the chat and perhaps Atlantis can read it to me.
When they start coming in, I will read them. By hand, Najuma
That's not what it says
says.
here. That's not what it says there.
Ajay says cups made using the old potter's wheel, of course. This is
Thank
not
you.
hand
Made
built
on a
ceramics.
potter's wheel. Yes? Can we all agree that that's what it says? Made on a potter's wheel. Can I get an amen?
You have some amens. You have Yah with a pottery wheel, Indra with a wheel, Cordell with a wheel. So yes, you have your amens.
All right, so there's our first example. People in Sudan in the 1st century AD had the potter's wheel. Cups, 1st to 2nd centuries AD. And this is what the British Museum website says. Wheel-made ceramic beaker in kaolinite clay. Vessel has slightly flaring walls and a rounded base constructed of fine eggshell ware at only 2 millimeters thick. Wheel-made ceramic beaker. 1st centuries to 2nd centuries AD. In other words, made 2,000 to 1,800 years ago in Sudan, made on a potter's wheel. Let that sink in. Now, in context, this is a book published by the British Museum, and this book was called The Kingdom of Kush. And what I've done is to scan page 172. Now, can you see examples 1, 2, 3, and 4? I know that some of you might not be able to see it, so I'm going to blow it up for you. Can we see that? All right, can I get an amen that people can see that?
You can see it. We can see it.
Right, now can you see that number 1 appears to be a 6-wheeled vehicle? Number 2 would appear to be a 2-wheeled chariot of some sort. Number 3, there are 2 separate vehicles with wheels. And number 4 appears to be a 2-wheeled chariot. So here you're seeing the transportation wheel. And the transportation wheel, so we've seen the potter's wheel already. We're seeing the transportation wheel. And again, this is in Sudan. And you can see the various temples that the archaeologists copied those images from. 1, 2, and 4 is from the Temple of Amen in Sanam, in Kush. And the third example is from a pyramid in Meroe. Did we know that people in Sudan had vehicles of 2 to 6 wheels? How many people were taught that in school? Can we get a yes if you were aware of that? Can we get a no if this is the first time you've ever heard it?
We have a lot of no's coming in. All no's.
Now, isn't that amazing? What about textiles? I saw this in the British Museum's catalogue, and it says cloth, perhaps from a curtain, printed in red and purple brown on an undyed cotton ground. And that is 13th to 14th centuries. Curtains? Curtains? Did we know this? Sudanese houses had curtains in the 13th and 14th centuries. Belts, possibly 9th or 10th century. Now, if you look at the belt buckle, doesn't that look like your belt buckles today? Are you feeling that? Some more belts, and you can see the wraparound loops. Don't they look like belts today? Let's get a close-up. And can you see that the wraparound loops have got ankhs on them? Did we know that Sudanese belts in the 9th and 10th centuries had ankhs on them? They kept that quiet, didn't they? So what's this? We read the caption, polychrome woolen rug. This is a rug, presumably from a Sudanese house, 5th to 6th centuries AD. 5th century is 400 and something AD. 6th century is 500 and something AD. Did we know that Sudanese houses from that period had rugs? And no doubt you have rugs today. Is your rug significantly better than this? What's this? The caption says large piece from an orange, green, and red woolen carpet enclosed in a glazed wooden frame. A carpet from the mid-4th to the mid-6th centuries. 4th century is 300 and something AD. Mid-6th century is 550 AD. Is that how the Sudanese were going on? Did we know this? Fragments of cushion covers. You've all got cushions in your home. What about that as a fragment? What about this as a fragment? And these were made between 1,500 years ago and 2,000 years ago. And the first design looks like something from the 1960s, and the second design looks like something from the 1970s. Cushion covers. Did we know that they had cushions? Okay, now a Sudanese book called A Miracle of Saint Menas and a Sermon on the Canons of Nicaea, 1053 AD, made it into the British Library, where it is manuscript 6805. And to my knowledge, this has never been reproduced in an African history book except when I did it. A Sudanese manuscript written in an ancient Sudanese script called Old Nubian. And this Old Nubian manuscript, written 1053 AD, they've held on to that manuscript for over 100 years. It's in the British Library. No one talks about it. Isn't that interesting? Right, now, Faras Cathedral, medieval Sudanese cathedral. This is British Museum, catalogue number EA1636. Now, in architecture, you've got columns, and then above the column, you have the wider bit called the capital. And the capital is what then supports the structures above the column. And this capital belonged to a cathedral that used to be in Sudan in 707 AD called Faras Cathedral. And Faras Cathedral was in ruins in the 20th century because, of course, it was built in 707 AD. So 1,300 years later, of course, it's going to be in ruins unless it's restored. But what happened, instead of it being restored, the different archaeological teams decided, well, let me take one bit of it, and it ended up in Poland. Another bit ended up in London. Another bit ended up here. Another bit ended up there. So Faras Cathedral, as far as I know, no longer exists. All the bits of it have been scattered to the four winds. But the Polish scholars did do something honorable with it. They did show that if you put all the bits together, what the structure would look like. And they showed it would look like this. And that is the lower portion of the cathedral. You can see the columns, you can see the arches. That is how the Sudanese were going on 707 AD. Now I'm going to show you the upper portion of that same cathedral. The upper portion would look like this. And can you see that you have a dome, and above the dome you have a high cross? That is what the Sudanese built 707 AD, 1,300 years ago. Now, for comparison, this is Faras, one of the Sudanese capitals, 707 AD. And this is my hometown in London, 1675 AD. And that, of course, is St. Paul's Cathedral. 1,000 years later than what the Sudanese built, and it too has a dome with a high cross over the dome. Let that sink in. All right, now, remember this? The Black Secret, where we are quietly empowering the people. Have you claimed your free book yet? Your free book are www.theblacksecret.co.uk, and we are giving away a book with the new concept of Black history called 100 Black History Facts. Go get your book. Now, for some of you, that will be your opportunity to dip your toe into the type of history that we deal with at the Black Secret. But for some of you, that's not enough and you want more. And if you want more, I'm going to show you what we have. As we wrap up, would you like to learn more Black history, more African heritage? We have 55 hours of Black history and 25 hours of wealth and entrepreneurial education available on our platform. Our site is called theblacksecret.co.uk, www.theblacksecret.co.uk, and subscribe. It is just $47 per month, which is the equivalent of £35 per month. So these are the classes we have available. We have these medieval African history classes, the empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, the empire of the Moors, the empires of Ethiopia, Nigeria, Kanem-Bornu, medieval Nubia, etc., 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 etc. You can look at those classes. That's the medieval period. Then we have the ancient period, the African origin of humanity, the African origin of civilization, the ancient Egyptians, people of Kemet, in other words, the real chronology of Kemet, the Old Kingdom period of Kemet, the first period of Kush, the Middle Kingdom period of Kemet, the later period of Kush, the civilizations of Black people in Asia, places like Carthage, places like Numidia. So all that stuff is also on the course. And then we have the modern period, where we're dealing with anti-slavery resistance and rebellion. We're dealing with Palmares in Brazil. We're dealing with the Ashanti Empire. We're dealing with the rise and fall of Black Wall Street, the African-American civil rights struggle, the modern Black British civil rights struggle, the South African struggle against apartheid, and bringing the story up to date. Even the Dahomey Kingdom and the elite Agojie warriors, the female combat troops, we even have a class on that. And then we have classes where we are teaching people to become entrepreneurial. We're calling it the mastery of wealth. And we have classes that teach people to become entrepreneurial and even offers you the opportunity to work with us if you want to. We have a special offer. We are offering a 48% discount if people jump in quickly enough, which will bring the price down to $23 per calendar month, and you can lock that in. And the classes are filmed in a London classroom. The classes are all online. You can watch them at your own convenience. If you want to watch them at 10:30 in the morning, you can. If you want to watch them at 6 p.m., you can. If you want to watch them at midnight, you can. You can start and stop each class at your own convenience. And if you get through everything in 1 month, you can then cut out, you've got your content. If it takes you more time, it takes you more time. And you've got full access to my lecture notes as well. And that is us, the Black Secret Education Project, where we are quietly empowering the people. Check us out, www.theblacksecret.co.uk. Thank you very much. I'll quite happily take questions that people have.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, family, yes, the claps, the hearts are coming through. And so definitely share your appreciation for tonight's Wisdom Wednesday. Fantastic presentation. As we're getting into the Q&A, family, please remember to post your questions in the Q&A box. Someone did just ask, how do we get the discount?
Yeah, just jump in. jump in. So my thing is if people move quickly enough, certainly we're going to be keeping the discount open for the next 2 weeks or so. So jump in.
All right, there you have it. And we placed the website in the chat, and you saw it on screen there for yourself. So definitely check that out. And the questions, keep them coming in. We're going to start with a couple of questions from Ajay, who is asking if you can speak on the Great Zimbabwe structure. Can you talk briefly about when it was built and what is known about how the stones were stacked together?
Certainly. Great Zimbabwe, there's two parts to the structure. There's the hilltop castle, and that's called the Acropolis. And the Acropolis is thought to have been built somewhere around 1085 AD. And that was built 300 meters up on the top of a hill. So it's a big drop on the way down. That's the hardest part to build because you're trying to build those stones up the hill. Then you have what's known as the temple, and the temple is the valley ruins, which is the big circular walls. And those walls are 35 feet high in places. And those were made of granite bricks. And the granite is the outcrop in the area. The people that built them found that if you poured boiling water over the outcrop, it would crack. And they would then take the cracked pieces and then form them into bricks. And then by putting brick on top of brick, you know that these structures contain no mortar. So it's entirely dry wall building. And the valley ruins are spread out over 3 square miles. And the archaeologists believe that between 18 and 25,000 people live there. And that would make medieval Zimbabwe the same size as medieval London. Now, the Great Zimbabwe was built on a network of wealth, and the wealth would be gold trading, ivory trading, and so on. They had access to 4,000 gold mines. And according to African-American scholar Dr. Charles Finch, they are believed to have cleared 43.25 million tons of ore in their mining activities. Did you hear what I just said? 43.25 million tons of ore. And that's the scale on which they were gold mining, and that is the scale of the wealth that they generated that enabled them to build the Great Zimbabwe. And then Great Zimbabwe became the capital of an empire that spread out over southern Africa, the empire called Munu-Mutapa. English language books say Monomotapa is the same place.
Okay. Next question. In your explorations in the European museums, what have you seen in terms of weapons invented and developed in different empires, such as Mali, Songhai, and Nigeria?
The Mali and Songhai material isn't in London. I suspect that would be in France. The stuff that's in London, there are things like firearms, but the most interesting weapons I saw were the ones that are from Central Africa. There's a type of weapon called a throw knife. A throw knife is an extremely complex knife, and it works on the principle of a boomerang. And a boomerang is where you throw something, and if it hits its target, it hits its target. But if it misses, it comes back to the person that threw it. And I suspect that in Central Africa, Not only did they have these throw knives, but they had a martial art associated with it. And if we were as serious about our history as, say, the Chinese are with theirs, you know that the way that the Chinese have been able to take their weaponry and turn it into the whole martial art, Wing Chun type of thing, we should be doing the same thing with the throw knives. So yes, there are some very, very interesting weapons. The throw knives are easily the most impressive.
Okay. Rebecca asks, can you expand on your study of museum archives for hidden artifacts?
Yeah, this is how you do it. If a museum has searchable collections, what I would do is put in very general things like Nigeria. What have you got? And then go from one country to another to see what they actually have and look at everything. And that often means scrolling through loads and loads and loads of rubbish to find one piece. Once you've got that piece, download the image and then the caption and then the date and the material and that type of thing. And it was easy to be able to do that with the British Museum because they make that stuff searchable. The museums in other countries do that too, but not all of them have searchable collections. And where they were searchable in London, I was able to find these pieces. Pieces that, because I do go to these museums, I know for a fact are not on display.
So along those lines of the museums of London, you mentioned that you have presentations on the Moors. Are there artifacts from the Moors in those museums? And if so, what have you discovered?
I visited Spain 3 times to look at the Moorish material. If you know anything about southern Spain, it's a very uneven country and there's loads of hills and valleys and hills. And on all the hilltops in the south, and I stress all, they have Moorish castles still there. And if you visit those sites, they will tell you, it will say Christian castle that used to be Moorish. They will have Christian churches that used to be mosques. And so they're there. And so I visited a lot of them. I photographed a lot of them. And they do have some of the collections of the actual pieces themselves, the art pieces. The Moorish material is even better than the material I've shown you today, right? It's some of the very, very finest in world history, absolutely exquisite. The Spanish have spent a lot of money keeping the Moorish heritage, renovated and so on. So I visited Cordova, I visited Jaén, I visited Olvera, I visited the Ronda Valleys. Incredible stuff, absolutely incredible. If you do get the opportunity to visit Spain, do check that stuff out. Now, the main issue though with the Moorish stuff is not all of that stuff belongs to us Africans. Some of the glory has to be shared with the Arabs. Yeah. The stuff that is definitely African is the city of Seville. That stuff is definitely African. And highly recommended, highly recommended. If you visit any one of those monuments, you could easily spend 4 hours just photographing what's there.
Okay. What region or empire in Africa do you think was the most artistically sophisticated in regards to their artwork, architecture, and textiles?
Textiles, I would have said Hausaland, northern Nigeria, and that would include Nupe. These are so splendid as textiles. If you see Nigerian politicians on the international stage, you notice they're the only African politicians that dress like Africans. And why is because their textiles are just better than everybody else's. In terms of fine art, the art of Yoruba land in southwest Nigeria, the Ife portrait heads are absolutely amazing. But then you've also got Kemet as well. Kemet's art, from colossal statues down to very tiny portraiture. Again, highly, highly, highly impressive. In terms of architecture, the finest architecture in terms of houses that people actually live in would be Swahili architecture. Swahili houses of the Middle Ages were between 1 and 5 stories. Houses with indoor toilets, indoor bathrooms. I've seen the toilets, I've seen the bathrooms. The wall decorations are absolutely off the charts. You all heard of the Black British supermodel Naomi Campbell? People heard of Naomi Campbell?
Yes.
Yeah, she has a semi-Swahili mansion in Kenya. You can Google it. There's a documentary series online called Open House. Google the one with Naomi Campbell and look inside her mansion. And I think you'd be impressed. I think you'll be impressed.
Okay. Next question. What do you think of USA museums?
Hmm?
What do you think
Yeah.
of USA museums, museums in the United States?
In truth, I've only spent 9 days in the United States. No, 12 days in the United States. I've only visited the museum in Washington that had the art collection of Bill Cosby and Camille Cosby, of the different African American artists that Bill and Camille Cosby, they own those pieces. That was amazing, but that's the only one that I can point to because that's the only one I've been to.
Okay, the next several questions, I saved them because I think they might tell a really interesting story, depending on which way you go with it. But two people kind of asked a similar question. They want to know, you mentioned that some of the artifacts in the museum were not available to the public. Is
Mhm.
that due just to the tremendous volume of things that they stole, or do you sense that some of the items are less accessible for other reasons? And then add to that, what might be other purposes for the hidden artifacts? You see.
I do believe that artifacts are not shown to create an impression that is not true about Africa. I do believe that uh, certain artifacts are not shown so that Africa can be made to look backward and primitive by not showing the real material that they have access to. And why I believe that's the case is if it really was the issue that there's too many artifacts and not enough space to display them, then why not put those pieces in the books? Okay, you can't put them on show, but put them in the books. They're not in the books either. And I was shocked to find that these pieces exist. And, how can there be a writing system in Sudan and the book 1053 AD, and that's not in any of the history books? How's that possible? So I believe that not showing this material is deliberate.
Okay, and then I'm going to combine two other questions. What kinds of ritual objects, such as divination plates, have you seen in the museums? And in your opinion, are European religious leaders using African ritual objects as part of their ceremonies? If not, what are they doing with these objects?
Um, it is a fact that that African divination material is in European museums. I don't know what they're doing with them, but my suspicion is the part of African religion that the Europeans really are running with is certain material, specifically from the ancient Egyptians. The ancient Egyptians had a body of knowledge associated with their deity Tehuti. And there's the 7 laws of Tehuti. And this is an area that I've researched quite heavily. The 7 laws of Tehuti is the backbone behind motivation theory. So you've come across the books, Think and Grow Rich. You've come across the books, As a Man Thinketh, The Secret, How to Win Friends and Influence People. All of these books are based on the 7 principles of Tehuti. And so wealth principles, success principles, achievement principles are based on those 7 principles. And then Europeans swipe those principles and turn them into the Hermetica, the 7 principles of Hermes. And that is what is spread across Europe, in my opinion.
Okay, wonderful. So Roberto asks, can you speak about African spirituality before the current colonized religion that is practiced today? Example, South Sudan Islam versus the Arab Islam that was sold back to Africans, and Ethiopian Christianity versus the Western Protestant Christianity. Do you know if there's any do you know if there's any truth to Ethiopia's claim to have the Ark of the Covenant?
Mhm. I don't know whether Ethiopia has the Ark of the Covenant or not. I know that they say they do, and they say that there's a building in Aksum where they have it. Ethiopia's Christianity, I've spent a little bit of time in Ethiopia to know that their Christianity is really Judeo-Christianity. An Ethiopian that calls himself Christian also follows Judaism, also follows the Old Testament. So all the fasts that go with being a Jew, the Ethiopians practice it. All the dietary requirements that go with being a Jew, the Ethiopians practice it. So if you're in Ethiopia, you're not going to be able to find pork anywhere. You just can't. Essentially, their religion is Old and New Testament. And it's certainly one of the oldest forms of Christianity on the planet. And those that practice just Judaism, even European Jews admit that Ethiopian Judaism is an older form of Judaism than what they practice. Okay, now with Islam, there is a version of Islam called Sufism, and Sufism was started by a Nubian called Zu-ul-Nun. He was born on the Egypto-Nubian border in the 8th century. And he is the first Sufi, and that's the version of Islam that is in places like Timbuktu and that type of thing. When it comes to traditional African religion, the most impressive one that has gone on all 4 continents South America, North America, Europe, and Africa, is the Yoruba religion. And the Yoruba religion is the basis of the religious culture of not just the Black people of Cuba, but everybody in Cuba. Not just the Black people in Brazil, but a whole chunk of the Brazilian population, full stop. A whole chunk of the Trinidadian population, full stop. And Yoruba religious culture is the basis of Afro-Cuban music. So the great queen of Afro-Cuban music, Celia Cruz, began life as a Santeria singer. Santeria is the Cuban version of Yoruba tradition. And so very, very impressive religious culture. And it has won converts, I'm in London. There are people in London practicing the Yoruba tradition. And of course, the most impressive traditional African religion, because of its scientific content, is the Dogon religion of the Bandiagara cliffs of Mali, but I'm sure you guys know that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Baba Robin Walker, for your excellent presentation. Thank you, family, for joining us. Let me come back on screen here. We would like to invite you out to our next Wisdom Wednesday, which will take place on October 15th. It is our annual Friends of the Congo presentation for Break the Silence Week. And you can go to ikgculturalresourcecenter.com to find a full schedule for the year, as well as sign up for our Egypt on the Potomac field trips. You can also find videos of our recorded Wisdom Wednesdays on YouTube at the Browder File. On YouTube, I did put that link in the chat, but it's youtube.com/@Browder File. And Baba Walker, if there's any final thoughts that you want to share with the family.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for coming out. Hope people enjoyed the session. Some very deep questions and some very impressive discussion. So it's been really good to be with a hip and knowledgeable audience. So it's really good. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, thank you all for coming out. And that concludes our program, and we will see you next month. And